Hi everyone, Mark here, Planning Account Director at Equimedia, welcoming you to the third session in our Digital Futures Now series. This video will focus on how we can build trust with consumers through video even in a cookieless world. Amisha, our Media Planning Director, will be joined by Google's Payal Pahalajani, Johan Slattery from Quantcast and Jack Neal from Teeds. They'll discuss the effects that lockdowns had on our media consumption, most notably how that's changed through video, but also how we can use video, even in a cookieless world, to raise brand awareness and engage with consumers. We'd love for you to join the conversation on Twitter using our hashtag #DigitalFuturesNow. Share with us your live updates and any questions that you have as well. I'll hand over to Amisha and the rest of our guest speakers with the session.
So thanks for joining us today in this panel discussion where we'll be discussing video advertising and building trust with consumers through video in a future cookieless world. So today we welcome to the panel Payal Pahalajani from Google, Jack Neal from Teeds, and Johan Slattery from Quantcast to help us explore this rapidly changing space in more detail. So since lockdown in March of 2020, we've seen significant increases and changes in video consumption online. With more people stuck to the confines of their home during lockdown, it was only natural that video consumption would increase. So before we get into the panel discussion, a couple of statistics just to set the scene. So the IAB UK's H1 ad spend report for 2020 found that video ad spend grew by almost 6% in the first months of 2020. And a survey carried out by the IAB in partnership with the Video Steering Group and YouGov showed that those who increased spend on online video advertising were likely to do so on outstream and VOD formats. The advertisers who increased spend in video benefited from larger audiences across social and video streaming platforms. Secondly, connected TV advertising has been on the rise. The Association of National Advertisers found that 70% increase in advertising in connected TV was found in 2020. And I think this has been influenced by advanced data solutions that allow first-party and third-party data to be tied together, allowing for more refined targeting. And with the continued drive of innovation in this space, coupled with evolving ways in which TV is consumed, we expect that this trend will continue and advertisers will be looking at how connected TV fits into their wider TV and marketing strategies. And lastly, streaming increased year on year in 2020. The YouGov International Media Consumption Report in 2021 found that streaming both increased its audience and time each viewer spent when comparing 2020 to 2019. So with more time spent at home, not only has streaming increased, but there have been changing patterns in when people were streaming as well. During a webinar hosted by YouGov to discuss this report, Sky commented that home working has led to people watching on-demand content between 12 and 3 p.m. And Ofcom reported a 31% increase in time spent on TV and online video content. In parallel to this, many of you will be aware of Google's recent announcement that the Chrome browser will no longer accept third-party cookies, and this change is scheduled for 2022. The Chrome browser change is a big deal due to its circa 70% market share. And these browser changes come into play alongside other changes such as GDPR and the California Consumer Privacy Act. So both the changes in video consumption and the changes to browser and regulation pose an interesting time for advertisers in the video space around how effective campaigns can be executed And how can video be used in areas such as brand awareness and building trust with consumers? In addition to this, with lockdown measures starting to be eased, what does the future hold for video consumption online and for advertisers? So let's start with the first question. What opportunities are there for marketers and brands looking to leverage video within this proposed cookieless future? Johan, let's start with you.
Yeah, so look, in terms of, I suppose, opportunities, like I think at the moment, like things are really ambiguous, and like there's a huge amount of uncertainty around what the cookieless future is going to look like. But I still think that that doesn't take away from the fact that video is still one of the, the most powerful mediums for brands to create like an emotional connection with their audience. So, kind of, as you mentioned there, like people have more devices than ever. They're regularly multi-screening. So, there is a huge opportunity to reach your audience throughout the day. And we're seeing, look, obviously there's big events coming up this year. So, we've got the Euros kicking off soon. We've got the Olympics, and for events like that, there's a much broader audience who's engaging. So we do see our clients planning their online video to complement their TV scheduling. And look, in terms of the cookieless future itself, like if we want to continue to reach audiences on the open web and at scale outside of like walled gardens, then we are going to have to innovate. And from Quantcast's perspective, we will likely be operating with a different form of ID, which, similar to the cookie, gives us a way of getting insight into who our audience is. But but I think then the only way to get scale is using probabilistic modeling. So from our I suppose from our opinion, like the deterministic and logged in data is never going to be enough to actually get that real scale. So the best thing to knowing whether a user is the right audience or a potential customer is for guessing. And it's the guess that they're the right customer. So like this guessing is the probabilistic piece. And when you have enough robust data and sophisticated AI modeling, you can make really accurate guesses. So, the better the data you have and the more sophisticated your AI modeling, the better your guess is going to be.
Brilliant, thank you. Jack, have you got any thoughts around that as well?
Yeah, I mean, outside of those walled gardens, like Johan said, they're ones that have seriously good logged in data, so the situation is different for them. But for open web partners like Quantcast, like Teeds, the main priority is ensuring that everything is migrated over to the cookieless world before we look at opportunities. Really, it's making sure that there's a smooth transition this year and next year, and that's the main priority. In terms of opportunities, though, I think one of the big things is contextual. So people have been doing contextual targeting for ages, and it will continue, and it will continue to grow. But I think what we'll see is people's approach to contextual will be slightly different. So as opposed to just appearing, if you're a brand and you might be doing travel apart, you might usually appear in just travel content. People will start to look outside the box and think, not just travel, what other mindsets, what other passion points do people have, and then reaching them in that way too. So it might be mindfulness content, relaxation content if it's a relaxing holiday that you're advertising, or it might be in business content, finance content if it's maybe something more of a business trip or a business flight. So I'll be thinking outside the box in those contextual realms. And similar to what Johan said actually about events, targeting people around the right time, maybe even the right weather. Those external events are also contextually relevant. I think all of these things will actually come into media plans as the cookieless world evolves. Absolutely.
And I guess it's never too early for advertisers to really start thinking about that now and get ahead of the game.
Absolutely. Get testing with it now, really.
Absolutely. So on to the second question. Are the video consumption trends and growth going to continue despite lockdown measures easing? Payal, what are your thoughts on this one?
I think we're increasingly seeing a world that's more open and that's more outdoors. And I think that's been a long-awaited change for everyone. I think the year that's gone by is a year of flux. And I think that's how we put it down in history as well. But coming back to a little bit of video and how that's changed is that There was a time when we all forced indoors, and that basically led us to adapt in areas and categories that we never thought video would play such a central role in. Things like education, things like entertainment, work, for example. We're so much more video first now in the way we work than we were before. So while some of the underlying triggers that caused us to shift in this direction will no longer be the reasons we choose video, for example, we will be allowed to be outdoors. So I'm sure people would want to spend more time outdoors. So the trigger is gone. But what's essentially happened in the year that's gone by is that habits have evolved. Habits evolved then, habits will evolve now. But we increasingly learn to rely on video. We learn to trust something. We learn to trust platforms. We learn to trust the information coming through them. And I think we saw that at least applicable across all age groups. To kind of share an example with you, audiences 45 plus that were so used to shopping in stores had to kind of move to a world that was shopping online. So the year gone by has challenged us to change and become more comfortable. So video evolved in that sense. So the watch times, I can't predict whether the watch times moving forward would go up or down, but I know the role that video plays has evolved. So it will be a world where we trust video more. Our reliance on video to discover new products, get reviews for products that we're seeing in stores, etc., is probably going to go up. Yeah,
Definitely. Johan, what about you? Do you think some of these trends will continue despite lockdown measures easing?
Look, absolutely. I mean, I think like the trend of video consumption, it was increasing anyway. I think there was double-digit growth even without the pandemic, but the pandemic just accelerated it, and really, I suppose, just as Payal was saying, that everyone was just indoors and consuming more video, but the growth was happening anyway, so I think it's definitely going to continue. And look, if you look at 5G, like 5G is on track to reinvent the media industry. Like it's opening up new opportunities for better video experiences for us as consumers on mobile devices. Like, I don't know if you've seen like some of the things they can do when filming events and concerts in 8K. Like it's stunning, it's amazing. Like, so I think advancements in technology are really going to kind of drive that and make video even more relevant. And look, it just means that advertisers need to be thinking about video and how video fits into their overall media mix. So answer is yes, for sure.
Yeah. And Jack, have you got anything to add to that as well?
Yeah, a similar point to what Payal made actually about the trigger points. I think people will still interact with digital mediums, including video, and they'll continue to, whether it's it's something like YouTube or browsing articles, in-article content. That kind of content consumption will continue to exist, but will exist in a different way. So what we're predicting is it'll actually move, as people are out and about more, it'll move more mobile again. So as people are indoors more, a bit more of a desktop interaction. As people are out and about, going to work, going to see their friends, the mobile will increase, the mobile traffic will increase. And that is a question then for creative teams to say, well, how can we actually maximize our creative in a mobile environment? As that mobile traffic increases, how do we capture attention there as opposed to someone sat at home on the desktop? So it's an important question for how you're going to build your creative. But yeah, I guess the flip side as well will, not just general consumption increase, will video advertising increase? And I know you were talking about the different percentages at the beginning, and the Advertising Association are actually predicting a 15% increase in total media spend as we move forward out of the lockdown. So it puts video advertising in a great position of, the Advertising Association are predicting a general increase in media spend. Now, I mean, there will actually be increases in TV and out of home because, well, that's what's forecast to happen as people are out and about more. But that will come with an increase in cost for both of these other channels as well. So then video advertising then becomes a great alternative, a great cost-efficient alternative to fit in with those out of home and TV campaigns that might be going on as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point actually about the cost of the media changing as people's habits start to evolve coming out of lockdown.
Especially like as out of home and TV that might have limited amount of inventory over a certain period, costs can rise and fluctuate quite a lot. Whereas we don't forecast any, particularly large increase in rates for online video. So it becomes quite a viable alternative.
Brilliant. So on to the third question, how should advertisers be planning and leveraging video? Let's start with you on this one, Payal.
I think when I've worked with a lot of advertisers in the past, the one bit that they struggle with is to identify what is the role that video needs to play for them. Is it an awareness tool? Is it a consideration tool? Is it a conversion and sales tool? And that answering that question and also having decided to be present full funnel is a very essential part of the planning process, and is what really kind of sets it off. So once they have that first piece identified, I think the next bits that come back to agencies and clients to sit and figure out together is, with that larger goal, what are the right campaign KPIs to be working with? What is the right ad format that speaks to those goals? And, tying all of that back to the business, a very key question in the campaign itself is who's the best customer? And I see businesses struggle with that as well, because video is such a broad space to be invested in. A very key question to identify is if you're moving up the funnel, which is the most effective area to move up the funnel. So I think the first step is to identify what video is meant to do for your business. The second bit is to make KPIs, ad formats, targeting, etc. align, and bidding as well to speak to that. And if there's a third bit, I think that third bit is extremely key and sometimes occurs as an afterthought, is measurement itself. Measurement is very much the part of the planning process. And I think the sooner you're prepared for it, especially in the cookieless world that we're talking about, the sooner you're prepared for it, the better setup you'll be in terms of managing those campaigns and getting them to evolve and scale over time. It's always that campaigns run and we review results, and we felt like we could have measured a bit more. So I think if that's part of the initial planning process and that's thought through, then you can have a full funnel targeting plan and also execute in that manner and measure in that manner, which just cohesively ties the entire value that video is supposed to drive for the business.
Yeah, definitely. Completely agree. I think we're working with clients on sort of full funnel YouTube activity, and it goes beyond just using video to extend the reach of TV or trying to reach light TV viewers, but also being able to use the likes of TrueView for action to really kind of drive people through that purchase funnel. Jack, what are your thoughts on how advertisers should be planning and leveraging video?
There's definitely a good point being made there about making sure you have the right KPI and make sure you know what your video is meant to be doing in the first place. But one thing for me that always stands out is making sure your creative is as good as it possibly can be, because without any creative or without good creative, your campaign is off on the wrong foot initially. So the few questions you have to ask, you have to look at what type of video advertising you're looking to do. So, is the sound opt-in? Is the sound opt-out? Is it a forced view? Is it a skippable view? Is it in-stream? Is it out-stream? All these things will tell you how a user will interact with your piece of video advertising. So ask those questions first, and then address how the creative should be built. Where will the messaging come? Can it come at the end, at the beginning? All these different questions can actually be baked into the creative process to make sure you end up with the right video at the end that fits the best type of video ad that you're running, whether it's all of any of those different points I just mentioned then. Generally as well, the KPIs that we tend to work, what I've seen people tend to work towards is all about attention. So it's then when it comes to measurement, maybe digging a bit deeper in those attention metrics. So don't just look at VTR, maybe look at viewable on completion rate, or if you've got the resource or money to do it, look at people like Lumen or Realize, these companies that actually invest a lot of money into eye tracking technology and emotional technology to really dig a bit deeper into those top line metrics that you're seeing from a video campaign.
Absolutely. And Johan, what would you want to add to that?
Yeah, I know you mentioned, it's not just about, I suppose, adding to tacking on something to your TV to your TV campaign, but what we are seeing though is a lot of TV planners and digital teams are starting to work a bit closer together and to really maximize the effect of that messaging. So whereas before they may have been operated quite separately, but once again, with the Euros kicking off in June, like, for us and for our clients, like, we'll build a bespoke audience for them, and based on who they want to target. So like, they'll share their TV schedule with us, and then we'll run online activity to kind of complement the Euros match times. And by doing that, they then get like that incremental frequency with an already engaged TV audience, while building awareness beyond their TV schedule. So look, I think frequency is definitely key. As like, it is a shame to go through the trouble to like, build out your creative message and like, have a really compelling, your compelling piece of creative for it not to have the right impact. So that's something that we like to kind of optimize towards, is frequency, alongside planning the right audience. And look, even for brands who don't have access, and I'm talking about like events like the Euros, but even for brands who don't have access to big budgets to appear on those premium spots, you can still build audiences around consumers interested in certain TV shows and TV personalities. So yeah, if you don't have a blank checkbook and unlimited budgets, I think it is just about being a bit smart with your planning, and you'll be able to still reach the right audience,
So moving on to talking about trust, it's becoming increasingly a hot topic for consumers. So how can brands utilize video to nurture trust? Jack, do you have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, so I know there's an Edelman study not long ago that said 81% of consumers actually buy based on trust. So it is a huge issue. And I think it's actually something that's become even more of a hot topic in the past year, with all the news around COVID, or it's, fake news being spread, and people are generally more concerned about where they're appearing. I think there's two ways you can really impact trust. One is with, the actual video ad itself, and the other is the environment that it sits in. So, I mean, with the video ad itself, you probably get a more detailed response from a creative team. But if I have to say that, it's making sure there's consistent storytelling, make sure you're getting some sort of emotional response from it, and make sure there's some sort of innovation. Now, personalization can come into it as well, but then there is that fine line between, if you personalize it in an ad, sometimes people find it a little bit creepy. So there's a fine line in that bit. But then apart from the actual creative itself, the ad, where it actually is sitting, is massively important. So it's very simple. Make sure your ad is in a brand safe environment, and that's where the trust will then originate from. It's also interesting to note that we've seen at Teeds anyway, a lot of brands turn to video in the past year for their corporate social responsibility messaging. I think it's actually, like, one of the reasons for it is it's actually very quick to activate, and it's very quick to actually implement a few different tests. So if there's a few different messages that you're trying to test around, that corporate responsibility, social responsibility, it's quite easy to set up a few different messages, a few different videos, and optimize and find which one actually performs the best. So yeah, there's a few different things you can do with video that can actually help build further trust with your brand.
Yeah, and I definitely agree, I think, on that sort of contextual element, and aligning the delivery of your campaigns around, trusted premium content just creates more of a synergy around that trust element. Johan, what are your thoughts around nurturing trust with video?
Sure. Yeah, like similar to what Jack was saying there, like video is like, it is such a rich medium. Like, you can build a whole narrative around, you can build a whole narrative rather than just communicating one single message. So like in the online space, like if you can like capture someone's attention for that like 15 to 30 seconds, like it gives you a huge opportunity to communicate something, as complex, like a concept as complex as trust, So like we conducted a piece of consumer research last year, in Quantcast, and what we see is that like consumers, they want to be shown rather than told what you stand for as a brand. So like, rather than telling them why they should trust us, we need to actually like presenting them with the evidence. So like, that's especially the case if you're trying to like communicate with people born between 94, 95 and 2014. So like the Gen Z kind of segment, like they genuinely feel passionately that companies have that responsibility to address environmental and social issues.
So on to the final question, and I think you've all kind of touched on this already with the responses given so far, but how should advertisers be measuring video? I think we're all kind of in agreement that it's kind of going beyond just the kind of standard metrics, and Payal, as you mentioned, thinking about the full funnel approach and what role video plays and the KPIs that you would attach to it. But yeah, Jack, is there anything further you wanted to add around that?
Yeah, I think I've touched upon it already, but going a little bit deeper into those top line metrics is key. So generally sort of attention metrics are what we work with. So yeah, don't look at just VTR, look at what's the viewable completion rate, how much of that VTR was actually in view. If you work into a CTR or traffic, maybe don't look at a CTR, maybe look at, a cost per incremental landing page visit, just digging a bit deeper on those top line metrics. But if you have the resource available and it's budget dependent, then go looking at those bigger studies, maybe those third-party studies. It could be a sales uplift study, it could be a brand uplift study, or if you are looking at attention, like I mentioned, Lumen, who look at how the eyes respond to an ad, or Realize, who look at the emotional response to an ad, bringing those into the campaign to get a bit more insight. But I suppose in terms of looking to the future, what's really going to happen is that there is a bit of a movement into industry-wide sort of cross-media currency. So like ISBA have an Origin project, and there's probably others in market doing something similar, so that we end up with this sort of a pre-agreed sort of measurement currency that's agreed by media owners, advertisers, and brands, and we can all use that as a single source of truth. That's the direction it's going in, but it's no easy step to make. So hopefully we can get there in the future, but I think that's where it's moving, in that direction anyway.
So I think all the signs kind of suggest that video usage and video advertising spend are on course to continue the growth into 2021. So thanks all of you for sharing your views and thoughts with us today. Before we sign off, I'd like to ask you each to give one takeaway for our viewers to go back with. What's the one key thing that they can take away and action? Payal, let's start with you.
I think, Amisha, this really nicely brings me back to what you kicked us off with. And I think it's the trend for connected TV, especially at Google. We've seen about, just in the UK, 20 million people have connected via connected TV in the last year. And that's a third of the population. We didn't see that the year prior. I feel this is the one bit that's going to stick, and brands are going to increasingly have to kind of evolve into a space where they're giving users content they want to watch on the larger screens, and on-demand content. So it's becoming a increasingly a video world which is demanding great content. So both of those, more video and better content being demanded. So that's something brands will have to adjust to.
Brilliant. Johan, what about you? What's your key takeaway for our viewers to action?
Yeah, I mean, look, as we've been discussing, like, video is a great way to build your brand, and like as a way to invest in like the long-term sustainability of your brand. Like, I think most people watching this, or many at least, will be aware of the study carried out by Peter Field and Les Binet. So the long and the short of it. And one of the key takeaways from that is we need to balance our short-term direct response activity with I suppose with more kind of brand building campaigns, and that if you want to see real year-on-year growth in terms of revenue and kind of your brand recognition. So I think key takeaway would be now is as good a time as any to invest in video. So if you have the resources in terms of creative and budget, give it a go, and just make sure you're optimizing towards the right metric, and and just make sure you're measuring it in the right way. Really, that would be my kind of key takeaway.
Definitely. And Jack, over to you.
I think a couple of things from me. I think the first one, like I mentioned at the beginning, we're forecasting a bit of a rise in mobile. So it's one thing to keep an eye on in the next couple of months. If there is a bit of a rise in mobile, seeing a lot more mobile traffic out there, maybe start to think about how to optimize your campaigns towards that. And I guess the other bit was talking about integration with other channels. I mentioned TV and out of home, but it can be social, or just making sure you're more integrated contextually. Video doesn't have to be a channel that sits in silo. It can work with those other channels. It can work with out of home. It can work with TV. It can work with whatever channel you've got, and thinking about it holistically in that way, as opposed to just video on its own. I think that's where brands will start to see massive gains.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for your contributions today. We hope you found it useful as well. Yeah, thank you very much for joining.
We hope you've come out of the session knowing a bit more, but please do share any questions that you have with us using the Q&A speech bubble underneath the timeline bar below, and we'll plan on answering as many of the questions we can on our live roundtable at the end of the week. And of course, continue to join the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag #DigitalFuturesNow. Thanks, guys.